Hey everyone, today I'm going to walk you through making a simple dice web application in Python. In this video, you'll learn how to use the Python Flask library, which is for basic web development, which will include things like requests, methods, and how to integrate front end and back end together. You'll also deal with random numbers, HTML, and displaying static images. You don't actually necessarily need to know HTML though for this video, because I'll go over everything you need to know. And if you don't want to learn HTML, then you can just follow along with that. So what is Flask? Flask is a web framework that allows you to quickly start and learn web development and learn the basics of web development. So with that out of the way, let's get started. So here I have an empty folder that I'm going to start my project in. So let's just create a new file in this folder called app.py. And in here, we're just going to import Flask. So we're going to type from Flask import and then capital F Flask and then render template and also request. You'll know what these do later on. And we'll also import random since that's part of rolling the dice. So now you might not have Flask installed on your computer. So what you'll have to do is install Flask by typing pip3 install Flask. And I already have this one, so it'll just say that it's there. So once that's ready, then Flask should work for you. And so let's just start our Flask application by typing app equals Flask and then name. Okay. And then down here, this will be the if statement that runs our program. So if underscore underscore name underscore underscore equals, and then in quotes underscore underscore main underscore underscore, then we will have app run, and we'll have debug mode true, which allows the program to keep running every time you save your file. So if you didn't put debug equals true, then you'd have to quit your program and then run it again every time you save your file. So when you're done with your app, you can remove this part. So this here is just telling this to run. This is our new instance of Flask that we are running, which is called app. So we're running that with debug mode. So let's start off by typing @app.root, and then we'll just do here with the slash. And if you don't understand what this means, so when you have a web address like google.com, this is technically google.com/ or whatever, right? So this is the home page, and if we did anything else after this, this would be google.com/ and then this string of characters here. So this is just our main page. This is the default page, and there is only going to be one page on this app. So here we just have this decorator here, and then let's just have the methods equal get and post. So this parameter here, methods, is telling it that people can access this page by getting its information. So that just means like if you go to google.com, you just click it and open it in your web browser, you have this. And then post is when the user is entering something into a form and they submit it. So they're posting something to the website, sending some kind of information to the website. So let's just define index, or you can call this homepage or dice or whatever. And we'll do if request dot method. So request here is this request that we've imported, and we're checking what method they are using, if it's get or post. So if it is get, then we are just going to return hi. Okay, so this is simple, right? I'm just going to run this program, and you'll notice here that it's running right here. So here it is, it just says hi. That's pretty simple. So instead of returning, we're going to use this thing called render template. So this allows us to actually have HTML files and send those out to the actual user so that they can view the website in a nicer way that isn't just text. So we'll do return render template, and we're going to have an HTML file that we'll create in a second, and I'll just call it index.html. And so we have to actually have this. So all Flask's HTML files are stored in a folder that we can create called templates. And inside this folder, we're going to create a file, and we'll have that index.html. So now we have this index file here. And so I'm just going to start the file. And so you can kind of just copy this. I'll have this entire project in a repository in the description, so if you don't want to have to type all of this out, you can just copy it. So this title is going to be dice, and in the body, let's just have a heading, call it dice. And so now, if we run the program, actually we don't have to run it again, we can refresh the page, and now we get this right here. So this is simple, and I'm going to copy Bootstrap into this. So if you don't know what Bootstrap is essentially a styling service that allows us to have good CSS for our website that we don't have to actually deal with right now. So this is really good for if you are a back-end developer and you're like making a web app, but you don't really want to style it too much. Bootstrap is like the perfect backbone for all the CSS, which is just styling of the website that you need. So before the title, I'm just going to paste something in here, and then in addition, in the body tag, but at the bottom of the body tag, I'm just going to paste this right here. And so now if we go back to the website and refresh it, we have nicer fonts, and you'll notice that when we create buttons, the buttons will look nicer, everything else will look nicer. And so if you don't really understand this, that's fine, because Bootstrap is just, like, this is Bootstrap's code that we're using to style our website, and we're just getting it from them. So I just collapsed these so that you don't have to see them. And so inside the body, this is where we're going to create our dice. So in this, we're going to have the dice, we're going to have the forms, we're going to have, and we're going to have the submit button. And so this is where it'll all happen. And so here I'm just going to create a form. So this will be an HTML form, and instead of action, we'll use method. So in this method parameter, we'll just type post, so that we know to send a post to this website, which we will handle with this if statement here, elif request.method equals post. We'll continue this once we're done with this part. So in post, let's just have let's just have a button for now. So we'll type input, type submit, and then the value will just be called roll, so that the user knows that that's the button that will roll the dice. And here we have this button. Now we want Bootstrap to actually know that this is a button, so I'm just going to type class. This will just tell it what CSS class, and Bootstrap has Bootstrap classes for button and button primary, which will be used in this project. So refresh, and here we have this. And lastly, there's just something else about styling that you don't necessarily have to do, but you know how this is very close to the edge? There's no like padding in there. I'm just going to put some of that in here. So I'm just going to type the class, and this is just going to be container. And let's just change the background just for something else. Background color, and we'll do powder blue. So now we can refresh, and so they are now indented more. We can just add a little breaker here. And there we have the basic website. And so if I click roll, now it's just giving us an error. It's saying it didn't return a valid response, and that's because we sent a post request to the website, and it got to here, but it didn't do anything, and it didn't give a response. So this would just be like an error. If we weren't in debug mode, we would just have a big error on our website, and the user would just be confused. So let's continue this. So for now, we'll just return use submitted, just so that we can see how this is working. So if I'm on this website, I click roll, now it says you submitted, and that's how that would work. So it knows that when we are on this website here, when we're on the root here, if we are getting the information, if we're just going to that web address, we will return this. But if we are already on it and we are sending a post request, then we will return and redirect them to this. Now we'll start making our actual form. So above the button, let's just add the two sliders that we'll have. So I'm just going to create a label for it, and let's call this number of sides. And then under that, we'll create an input, and this will be the actual slider. So the name here is going to be num sides, and this will be used in our app.py to differentiate between which value was given. So when we want to know the number of sides of the die in our program, we will be able to actually see that and see that form data from this input. And this type is going to be range, which is how you do a slider. And let's have a value, but let's just leave that blank for now. And we'll do minimum. We want the minimum amount of sides to be 1 and the max to be 6, because we'll have the max of 6-sided dice. And we'll do another one of these, but we'll call this one num dice. So if I go back to this website, you can see that we have these two here. I might want to put a breaker in here and add a label for the next one. So this will have label number of dice. So number of dice. Okay, so now I have this here. We have number of sides and number of dice. Sorry, I'm just going to put one more breaker so that we have this on the bottom. Okay, so I just did one more. Okay, so we want the user to see a number, like which number they've selected on the side here. So this is like a tiny bit of JavaScript, so you do not have to understand what I'm doing here. But essentially here, I'm just going to have, after max, we're going to do on input, and we'll, this dot next element sibling dot value equals this dot value. And so we're telling it to, we're going to be able to show what number. So we'll have an output tag here. We're just going to start it out with 1 because it's going to start out on 1. The value will be 1, so we'll put 1 here. These are both going to change eventually because we'll have it so that it stays on whatever the user last had it on. But if we now go back to here, we have this one working. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It goes and it changes in real time. And so let's just do that for the last one as well. So put 1 for the number of dice. Actually, this one should be 6 because we'll start out at 6. Okay, so 1 for the number of dice. We'll have 1 die at first, and then we'll copy this exact same thing. And if you're noticing that all my parameters are on different lines, it's just when I save the file, I have an extension on VS Code that's rearranging my lines to make them look nicer. It still works the same way. So after this input, we have an output that is 6. So let's save that, and now we have, oh, that was wrong. I meant to put 1 here. Okay, that's the output is where it starts out, right? So this is what changes. So if I had this on like 100 at first, as I change it, it would just change. But we want it to start on 1, and so now it's changing. These change in real time as we change them, but it still doesn't do anything. So we want to be able to get these pieces of information and put them in our app. So let's remove this return statement, and we'll set the number of sides equal to request.form.get and then num sides. So we are setting a new variable equal to this, we're setting this variable equal to whatever this input gives us because we named it num sides. So we're getting it from there. We're trying to search for it with this, and that's where we're getting it from. And we're also going to turn this into an integer. So put parentheses around this and just type int, because that would be like doing this, int and then 1, right? Because this is changing this string into the integer 1, just like that, so that we can actually evaluate it as an integer. And we'll do the exact same for the dice. So here's how this is going to work. We now have these numbers here. And so here it's going to return an error, but we're printing it into this console just so we can see what's happening. So I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to set the number of sides to 5 and the number of dice to 6. Hit roll. course, it has an error, but if I scroll up to here, we get 5 and 6, which is correct. It's exactly what I did because we got that information, we brought it to our Python file, and then we printed it. So I'm going to remove these. And so now let's start actually doing things with these. So I'm going to create a list called chosen nums. These are the numbers that are chosen, and we need a list because there could be multiple dice. So now we're going to do for x in range and then 0 to the number of dice. So if they did 1, right, this would repeat once. If they put 2 for the number of dice, we would do this twice. So we're going to append a random number to chosen nums. Like, so for every one of these dice, we'll append a random number. So random.randint1 and then to the number of sides. So here we're using random, and this is the random module that we imported. And we're getting a random number from 1 to whatever number the user decided. So this is where, because both of these times here, where they're choosing the number of dice and number of sides, these are user specified, so that's why we need variables here. So if we always had 6-sided dice, we would just put 6 here instead, but the user's choosing this, so we want to give them a random number between the number that they chose. And now we'll have a list of files. And so here, this is an empty list, and I'm calling it files list because we're going to have image files for each die. But we don't have those yet. I'll add those in a bit. So for now, we're just going to print numbers onto the website page, and then I'll show you how to do that. So for every item in the chosen numbers list that we've generated, we're going to append to files list, and let's just say 1 or 2 or whatever it happens to be, right? We're going to put item, because item is for every one of the items that are in this list, we're going to append it to files list. And then lastly, let's just return render template, and let's just go back to index.html, and let's give this a parameter. So we are able to pass variables into our HTML file and print them out on here, because in our backend it's choosing what these variables will be, and then it sends it to our HTML so it can say the right thing on the page. So let's have files list. As I said, there aren't actually files involved yet, so this is just files list is just a list of randomly generated numbers, and we'll pass in we'll pass in files list to that. So the files list that this will get will equal all the items in here, and that should be good for now. So we'll add this parameter to the other return statement as well. Equals, we'll just have it as none for now. And so let's run this. So I have number of sides is 6 and the number of dice is 3. So we should get 3 random numbers. I'll hit roll and nothing shows up on the website. That's because we didn't actually specify where to show it. We just passed variables in. So now we'll just add that. We'll put it right under this heading here. So this is how you add the variables. So you have these 2 brackets, 2 sets of them, and inside there you just simply type the variable. So our variable was called files list, and so we're just printing the files list. And so I'm just gonna do the exact same thing: 6 sides, 3 random numbers, and we get 2, 6, and 4, which is nice. And every time we do this, we'll get a different one. But if you're noticing here, every time, like let's say I wanted it to have 4 sides and 5 dice. Every time the user has to go back and set it, but what if they wanted to roll it multiple times? So this is just a little bug that we can fix right now. We'll pass in variables called, so first one will be sides default. So this is what the default amount of sides will be set to. So the default for this slider. So every time it'll be equal to what the user last set. So we'll just set that to num sides, and then dice default is num dice because we want it to be the same. And we can copy this for this last one, but since this is probably their first time on the actual page for that day, we'll set the number of sides to 6 and the default to 1. And now instead of having the value set at 6, and the output set at 6, we will just put these variables in place. So I just added that to the value parameter because that's where the slider is set, and then I put it in the output tag, which is what this number is set to. And so now, if I do this, it will work for only this top number. Sorry, I didn't save that. Okay, so it'll work for this top number. So every time it stays at 4, unless I change it. It's 3 now. It stays at 3 every time the page goes back. But if I just go to the website, it goes to 6. So that's how that will work. And then let's do it for the next one as well. So this value will be dice default. I think that's what I called it. Yes, dice default. And we'll put it over here too. And there we have this part. So if I wanted it to always have one side and have 6 dice, which is pointless because there would only be one possible number, we'd have 6 ones every time. If I change it now like this, it would stay at 3 so that we can just keep hitting it without having to change it every time. Okay, so now that that's done, we can actually start adding our dice because that's the last part. We need to have these files. So you can use any photo editor you want, and I'll also have the list of dice images in the repo, right? Because they're going to be in the folder that I'm going to create in a minute. But I'm just going to use Google Drawings because that's what a lot of people are going to be either familiar with, or it'll just be easy for them to use because a lot of people don't buy like professional ones. I'm just going to go to page setup and make this a square. So we'll do 7 by 7. And so now we have a perfect square that we can add our dice to. So let's create a shape here. And of course, like I said, you don't have to actually do this. You can just copy the images from the repo, but I'm just going to do this real fast just so that you can see it. So we'll make them white here, and we'll start putting the circles in. So I'll start with the first one, which will be 6. So I think this is pretty good. So I'll just save this file, and we can you'll keep making more of them. So every time you do it, you just change the order and make them how you want. And so once you do that, right, like I said I'd just do it fast. I have them in the repo. We'll create a folder called static, and this is where all of our static things will be. So that includes images and not templates like HTML because they can change with these variables and everything like that. So the static will just be like images for this video. You can also have audio and things like that. So here I'm going to paste them all in, and now I have them. So if you look here, I've got these nice dice here. Those are all the images. And so I name them all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.png. Make sure they all are .png or .jpeg, whatever. Make sure they're all the same, and label them as they are, right? So when you're at 6, make it 6.png. So that way now we can actually have files here that we'll use. So now we have the list of these files. And so it's labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But when we get into the HTML, we're actually going to give it the full file path. So we'll have, for example, it'll be like static 1.png. And we should do that right now. And so once you have these, you can go to your HTML file and display these. But instead of displaying a list of the file names, which is kind of pointless, we want to actually display the actual images themselves. So this will be done with the image tag. And so we'll do static, and then for example, it'll be 1.png, but instead of 1 here, we're going to make this the file. So for now, I'm just going to put this here. We'll change this in a second, because what we're going to do is we're going to have a for loop. So have the brackets, and the syntax for things like this is %, and we'll do for item in, and we have to pass this list in. So we've already done that. So for item in files list, we want to show this image, but we want to display the actual item. So item. And then you have to end for in this Jinja syntax. This is called Jinja syntax. When you have these curly braces with the %, or just the double curly braces, end for. And so this is saying for every item in this list, we're going to display that item. So by displaying static, whatever the number is, .png. So now let's go back to here. And so this is, oh yes, I forgot to change that. Okay, so it's not iterable, so we have to change this here. So let's just say that it is 1 because, actually, let's make it 6. So there's one, so this will say that there's one die and it's on the 6 sides. So here we have this. This is a pretty big image. Let's do style. And that'll be width. We'll just go with 30 pixels. Let's see if that looks good. That's a little small, actually. Let's go with 50. It's still too small. 70C. Yep, that's good. Okay. We'll have a breaker at the end of this for loop, not inside it though, because we want the dice to display next to each other. Let me show you what this looks like with multiple dice. So this is what it'll look like with multiple dice. So let's say I have 3. They all display right next to each other, which looks pretty cool. If we do 6, we'll have 6 in a row, and we can let them have more numbers. We should actually let them have more than 6 dice. So the max here is going to be, make sure you go with the number of dice, not number of sides. And we'll just go with, let's say 10. Let them have 10 of them. All right, let me see here. Okay, so 10. Now there's 10 in a row. They're all randomized. We can have them have 2 sides each, or just have 1 die. I think I need to put another breaker at the end of this for loop because it's still not big enough. Okay, there we go. So there's space in between here and space here. I hope you learned something. We learned quite a lot about Flask, web development, requests, random numbers, and static images, and a little bit of HTML as well. And so if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.